Hi, my name is Hermene Hartman with Ndigo Studio. You know, the business of journalism is different. It's changed. But the discipline of philanthropic giving has also changed. They've come to the rescue, just like a white knight, to rescue journalism. Social media has changed our world of communication. Everybody is a journalist. Everybody is a photographer. Everybody is a videographer. And the news, traditional news, sometimes it leads with an amateur story. We don't just read newspapers anymore. We've got Facebook. We don't just look at TV anymore because we've got streaming. And we don't just listen to the radio, we've got podcasts. Never before have there been so many media choices. But the changes have brought decline to traditional media, and a new media has emerged, and the business of media, well, it's brand new. So today we're going to talk about those changes and the funding that has evolved to maintain traditional media and to help new media with the changes. Our guests, well, they're Daniel Lash, an expert, Vice President of Impact at the Chicago Community Trust Foundation. Lolly Bowean, she's a media officer for media and storytelling at the Field Foundation. And Tracy Baim, she's the publisher of the Chicago Reader. The Reader's 50 years old, and next year it transfers its business model from profit to non-for-profit. What does that mean? So let's talk about the changes in media and the people who are making it possible. So Daniel, I'm going to start with you. You are at Community Trust, and after a decade career at Chicago Public Media, WBEC Radio, you have experienced the changing face of media, also moving out of traditional media into funding media. Talk about that for me.
I was most certainly the person working tirelessly to support good journalism, right? And so moving from WBEZ here in Chicago to Philanthropy was quite a shift. But I did it because I wanted to understand philanthropy more deeply and understand the mechanism of philanthropy, because I knew that philanthropy would become a sort of a major supporter of media moving forward. Mm-hmm. And it most certainly has.
You saw it. You saw it coming.
Yes, no matter if you're in commercial media or non-commercial media, the business has been amazingly disrupted over the last decade. As you had mentioned, consumers, individuals get their media in vastly different ways, and it's hard to monetize sort of those eyeballs or ears in the way that we once did. And so I still think it is possible to earn revenue based on your audience. But I think in addition to that, good journalism, good old-fashioned, fact-based, evidence-based sort of journalism will require philanthropic support.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
You're saving media. And Lolly, you've had a wonderful career as a writer, Chicago Tribune, Washington Post. You've won many awards. What do you see as the changing face of media as it exists now?
Well, I agree with Dan. As you noted, for much of my career, I worked as a journalist and as a storyteller. And as a journalist, I always wanted to spotlight people who I considered the underdogs, people who were doing extraordinary things but seemed very ordinary. And in Chicago, I was always really devoted and dedicated to going into communities that I felt didn't get a lot of attention and didn't get the type of spotlight that I felt that they deserved. This shift into funding has allowed me, and what attracted me, similar to Daniel, is to spotlight the other storytellers in media organizations that are doing that similar type of work. We have a really diverse media landscape and ecosystem here in Chicago, but we have a long history of having Latinx-owned press, of having a press that caters to the African American community, community here of press that also caters to different languages. And so those media outlets have not really had the opportunity to be supported from philanthropy for a long time. So just as almost like they say in the Black community, that when the mainstream gets a cold, the Black community gets pneumonia. Well, similarly in the media landscape, if the larger mainstream media is struggling and needs philanthropic support, well then so do these smaller minority-owned media outlets. And so that's the kind of bridge that I wanted to do in this work, is give a way to support these long-lasting, very needed and deserving media organizations that serve other populations in Chicago.
And let me say this, I thank both of you, because Ndigo Studio would not exist without either of you, because you've been supportive, and thank you for responding to the call of really what amounts for me is transition. So Tracy, you're about to go into transition. The Readers, 50 years old, you started and founded Windy City, dedicated to gay community. You had to close it, and now you're transferring the Reader from profit to non-for-profit. What does that really mean?
Well, it's partly a legal designation because the Reader's been losing money for years. It's not been a for-profit for quite some time. It's been quite neglected by owners, one owner after another, and it was losing over $1 million a year when the current ownership took over. So I knew that the ramp that these owners were going to have would end, and so about a year ago we started the process of applying for 501c3 status from the IRS for the Reader Institute for Community Journalism. We were able to get that designation a few weeks ago. So within November of this year, we will open the nonprofit and we will slowly start to close out the for-profit. And for us, it's not about one model being better than another. This particular model will allow us to get additional types of revenue, but we can't rely on any one revenue stream. That's been the failure of media. So we hope it'll just add to our toolkit for survival.
So will the editorial content change, or does it stay the same, or does it alter in some form or fashion?
We hope it just makes the editorial content stronger and allow for more funding to get more great reporters in. So the mission and vision of the Reader will stay the same.
That's good. Distribution and everything stays the same.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a switch. Will you still take advertising?
We still will take advertising. One of the things we're looking at lobbying on a national level is to have advertising not considered unaffiliated business income for newspapers. It is now, and so it's taxed at a higher rate than a sponsorship or donation. WBEZ has dealt with this issue for years on what's an ad and sponsor. So for print newspapers, this is kind of a new problem, and we want to lobby nationally to have that be one of the changes that happens so that we can continue to take advertising and not worry about it costing us more money than it might be worth.
So Tracy, talk about, because we're affiliated and we are in an organization that you've started together, and New York did something interesting, and that was they explained that they made it kind of mandatory for government to advertise in media, and we're trying to bring that to Chicago.
Right.
Hear me, Lori, we're bringing this to Chicago.
City University of New York did a fantastic program a few years ago where they FOIA'd all city agencies to find out where they spent their money on marketing. Not every agency markets, but those who do. They wanted to find out where. And once they found out that 85% of that money went to just a handful of mainstream corporate-owned media, they were able to get Mayor Bill de Blasio last year to issue an executive order saying that 50% of that money needs to go to community media.
50%?
50%. 2 weeks ago, we started our FOIA process with support from CUNY, and we've FOIA'd not just city agencies, but all sister city agencies, major county and state agencies, and we're just starting to get the responses in now. Some agencies do a great job at it. You know, Cook County Treasurer Maria Pappas' office has always been excellent at doing it, but vast majority of them don't want to bother with any of us. We are like herding cats, feral cats, so I don't blame them. So one of the things we hope the Chicago Independent Media Alliance does is make it easier for them to do it. You know, have a website where all our media kits are, make it real simple for them to say, I want to advertise in all Latinx media, all African American media, et cetera, or just general community media.
Okay, and so that's coming to Chicago
that'll be
soon,
phase 2.
we hope, right?
Yeah.
So Daniel, you talk about impact, not just a donation, not just a sponsorship, but you want impact. Explain the impact giving.
Well, for me and for us at the Trust, impact is really about the journalism, right? It's about the storytelling. The question that we ask first and foremost, like, is the content relevant to the intended audience? Like, is it necessary? Is it something that folks in community, and we're particularly concerned about Black and brown communities in Chicago, is the content that they have access to meaningful, right? Is it authentically reflecting the narratives that come from those communities? So impact is like, if the journalism is good journalism, the journalism is relevant to the end user, that's impact. One way to think of it is, particularly in this time that we're in politically, our residents, particularly Black and brown residents, receiving information they need to be viable civic actors, right? Are they able to sort of operate in the civic space and have the information they need to operate effectively? So that's impact. I just want another form of impact as we think about, like, how do we finance this? I want to sort of pick up on Tracy's point about what happened in New York. Like, when people hear that story, they often think, well, that move is a charitable move. Like the state should, set aside advertising for community-based media. It's not just charitable. If the content is good and relevant, the people in those communities are consuming content on those platforms. So if you want to reach Black folks, if you want to reach brown folks, Latinx folks, you name it, you should be supporting the media that they're consuming.
It's marketing.
It's good marketing.
It's good marketing.
Right? So I think it's important to make that distinction.
It is. And speaking of impact, we'll be right back after we get some impact commercials.
Though human ingenuity will continue to make various inventions, with the help of new machines built to do the same, of this I am certain: no invention will ever be devised that is more beautiful, more simple, and more purposeful than those that nature designs, proud server of the most advanced machine on Earth.
Hey, we're guests here. Close the door. It's probably why our energy bill is so much higher than yours.
You know, ComEd makes it easy to save money and energy. Yeah, look, we even got an instant rebate on this smart thermostat. And rebates on Energy Star appliances, like this refrigerator. And this washer-dryer combo. Close the door!
Find even more rebates from the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program at ComEd.com/rebate.
Closed captioning is sponsored by the Illinois State Lottery.
So, Lolly, how do you determine what kind of projects to fund?
Well, we have a couple of metrics that we use, but first and foremost, we're really concerned about equity at Field Foundation and equity in media. And that's in part because historically, African American owned and Latinx owned media and storytelling firms just have not gotten the philanthropic support that they've needed to be competitive in the media space. So one of the things that we look at is who owns the media, what type of stories they're telling, and who are they communicating to. To piggyback a little bit off of what Daniel mentioned earlier when he talked about different, the way the government is reaching some audiences with their work, but not all audiences, it makes me think of one of the grantees that we fund, which is The Tribe, a digital publication that targets African American millennials of a particular age. Earlier this summer, during the pandemic, when we were all supposed to be on lockdown, there was a report in TMZ about a house party that took place that involved quite a bit of young people who were not observing the safety precautions. That story ran on TMZ and was broadcast to a national audience with very little context. Right afterward, word, the tribe did a story which revealed not only some context to why those young people were gathered, but also that some of the messaging that was being sent from City Hall wasn't reaching young African American and Latinx readers and listeners, in part because it's just not geared for that audience. And so there's a publication that is targeting them, reaching them, and not only do they deserve to have advertising from city agencies and government agencies, but they also need the support of philanthropy to make sure that they are boosted and stable and able to create a financial model that makes them competitive in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Here's something I want to ask, because when it's a new term. So what's the difference between reporting, journalism, and storytelling? When I first heard storytelling, I was like, it sounded like fiction. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, now we're going to do fiction. But give me, because it's becoming, I mean, it's a term. It's a journalism term. Give me the differences.
Well, I think that because we're in a multimedia space, we use storytelling as a broad label for many different types of fact-based media. So you can be a podcaster who is reporting, giving facts to the public, conducting interviews, but you are still ultimately a storyteller. Journalists who work for traditional media can tell stories or deliver facts to the public, but depending on how they write and how they report, it can also be folded into a story. So I think just storytelling is a broad label for journalism that's fact-based, that is researched, that is accurate, but that is told in a way that the public can receive it. And sometimes that's on multimedia platforms.
Mm-hmm. So we're still talking about reporting. We're
Absolutely.
Still talking about the whole quality of reporting. Now, we talk about ethnic media, we talk about black media, we talk about small media, but what about the mainstream media and inclusionary factors? Are we still working on that?
Absolutely. Well, one of our grants that we've made this year actually is to a for-profit, large-scale media platform, the Chicago Sun-Times. They're led by an amazingly dynamic CEO, Nakia Wright, and she had a vision for really building or reimagining sort of their newsroom, and they wanted that newsroom to be deeply connected to the city. There are 2 beat reporters that they wanted to hire, but based on their business planning, they didn't think they would be able to hire them for 2-3 years possibly. I thought it was perfectly appropriate for philanthropy to provide the startup capital to that newsroom so that they could bring in the social justice reporter, and that person could hit the ground and start reporting, right? Start doing good journalism, which is to me good storytelling, and because quite frankly we need that content now. We can't wait for 3 years, and so one thing that we're seeing nationally is that creative and strategic partnerships between philanthropy and traditional large-scale media. I would say that, again, those aren't long-term engagements, right? So I don't think that you will see the trust funding the Sun-Times in perpetuity, but it's a public good to have the environment covered the way it should be, to have urban affairs covered the way it should be, to have social justice covered the way it should be. And it's our business and philanthropy to underwrite public good.
At one time in Chicago, I might be wrong on this fact, but I don't think so, we had more community newspapers than anybody.
We certainly have almost every ethnic group represented in Chicago, right?
Right.
And there are multiple Polish language stations, Latino stations. There's probably close to around 300 if you count even some news-based podcasts and stuff. I think over 100 of those are very viable and part of a larger play in the larger ecosystem. Some may be a 1-hour brokered radio station, on a network. So I do think that we do have a vibrant ecosystem, but without it, it's a training ground for mainstream media.
That's
but
right.
It also used to be a one-way street. So what Daniel's talking about in terms of funding at the Sun-Times, those people then get training at a mainstream outlet. Maybe they start their own outlet in a couple of years. So I think it is great to fund both because we need the larger institutions accountable whether they're owned by Alden Capital or owned by unions, they still have many, many more journalists actively out there on the streets than any one of us can do. And I have always loved when I see one of my journalists go make it in the big world of journalism, but now a lot of those younger journalists, they want to come work for community media.
That's right.
So having them having a training ground at the Sun-Times or Tribune or BEZ is terrific. So it's all good.
Lolly, you miss being a reporter on the street? Writing your very own stories?
I don't miss being on the streets, but I definitely have times where I miss being a storyteller. But now I'm telling stories in a whole new way.
Another way.
And that these stories are impactful because these are the stories that are actually funneling dollars into some newsrooms. And just as Tracy mentioned, the training ground that the Sun-Times creates to begin seasoning journalists to come back and start their own outlet, well, when we support particularly minority-owned community journalism, then we are also training those journalists to diversify the larger mainstream media landscape, right? And I think sometimes the public doesn't even know the relationship that the mainstream media has with community journalism. When I was in the newsroom, I used to joke that if you watch the Today Show on ABC, that you're just seeing in video the New York Times 3 days later, right? Because we learn from each other as media outlets. And so being able to empower community journalism organizations and smaller journalism organizations means having an impact and telling stories in a whole new, broader way.
We'll be right back after these commercial messages, and we're talking about media in Chicago, a new way.
This could work.
We're taking you home now, sir.
Are you a search and rescue?
No, I'm with the resort.
What?
Hey, we're guests here. Close the door. It's probably why our energy bill is so much higher than yours.
You know, ComEd makes it easy to save money and energy. Yeah, look, we even got an instant rebate on this smart thermostat. And rebates on Energy Star appliances, like this refrigerator. And this washer-dryer combo.
Close the door!
Find even more rebates from the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program at ComEd.com/rebate.
So one of the things I want to tell you both, I think that you have brought welcome change to the world of philanthropy for media. So Tracy, you have had 2 community newspapers. What changes do you bring to bear? Example, you cannot do one medium anymore. The way I say it is you do one story and then you push it out 10 times. You gotta do Facebook, you gotta do Instagram, you gotta do a podcast. You've got to do different things with that one story. There's so many journalists now, older journalists, traditional journalists, I guess maybe I should say, get overwhelmed that you got to do the blog, you got to do the Facebook, you got to do the Twitter, you got to take the picture, because all of those were jobs at one time. Tracy, how do you handle that? How do you reckon with that?
Well, we don't force people to be something they aren't. But what's good is that the Reader is a little bit different than a daily breaking news Tribune type of place. Ben Jarofsky has a podcast, for example. We do that with the Sun-Times. And he's an old school print journalist, right? But he really has adapted well to that radio type of personality. Many of our younger journalists love social media. They want to amplify their own stories. They want to get sources and ideas and fact check and find people through social media.
Something that upset me dearly was July 3rd, 2020, the New York Times decides to capitalize the B in black. When I started Ndigo, the very first article that I wrote, my first editorial was, "We will capitalize the B in black." Why did it take so long? I mean, how do these revolutions come about?
I think those are conversations that have come over and over again. But this summer we saw some really serious uprisings, and we saw that the public was demanding change. And that wasn't just change from government, that wasn't just change from high up, but change from all over. And so I think that there has been and continues to be a reckoning, but this summer that was the moment.
Moment of change,
yeah,
right? Real
change,
right? I say that Black Lives Matter got Aunt Jemima off the pancake box.
They most certainly did.
Yeah.
But that point is absolutely right. The notion of mainstream, Hermene, I think, is challenged now, right? I think there were publications, platforms in this country, local, regional, nationwide, that made assumptions about how people would get their content. We have businesses now have to compete in a way that traditionally they didn't have to compete. You combine that with things that are happening in our society, and I think you start to see folks start thinking critically about some choices they probably should have made a long time ago, right? I think platforms like The Tribe, here local, platforms like yours have been deeply rooted in community for years, are now in a position to grow and thrive and compete. And it's going to sound odd, but compete with platforms that we traditionally, particularly us of a certain age, saw as kind of the standard bearers of journalism. My kid doesn't see any difference between The Tribe or the New York Times. Quite frankly, I think you would have younger listeners trusting
The Tribe.
Yeah, that media platform that's more proximate to them. In the same way that as we came up in Chicago, when I came to Chicago, I trusted your journalism in Ndigo because it connected me to my communities.
I also think, though, that the audience that we cater to changes because now the funding model has changed. So since the larger mainstream does not have to cater to one particular audience, and let's face it, that's a spending audience, then now they have the doors can be open to cater to multiple different audiences, right? So, I mean, what keeps the mainstream media going is advertisers, and advertisers paying into their products. So now everything is at a halt. Now it's not competing over advertising. Now it's all about, well, how can you actually move readers, listeners, and viewers to your product? And that changes the dynamic.
Each audience is different. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lolly. Thank you, Tracy. And thank you, Daniel. This has been Ndigo Studio talking about the media. Thank you for watching.